It's Sunday, April 28th. I'm Matt Harmon. Welcome to the Yahoo Fantasy Football Show. It is a hell of a day to talk ball because the NFL draft is officially, fully, completely in the books. And joining me to do just that is the one and only, the draft grader himself, Yahoo's Charles McDonald. Charles, what's going on, buddy?
What's up? It's been a long weekend, emotionally, work-wise. I was, as people who listen on the Round One podcast, I coped pretty hard about the Michael Penix pick, but the Falcons had some nice defensive line picks on day 2 and day 3, so they got upgraded to a D- for my draft grade instead of just a plain old F. And you can go find those on Yahoo Sports. There's draft grade, write-ups, favorite pick, overall grade, least favorite pick for every single team in the NFL. And if you complain, I will not be seeing it for a few days. So have at it.
Excellent. Yeah, I would say that when I last saw you on late Thursday night,
about 2 a.m.
post midnight. Yeah, back in the East Coast. I would say we're probably at emotionally, maybe like a 1 out of 10, maybe like a 0.5 out of 10. I would say you're at I'll give you a pretty good 6 right now, buddy. So you've done a pretty good job recovering here.
Yeah, I'm good. I'm alive now. I got like 4 or 5 hours of sleep last night. I'm ready to podcast. I'm looking at this week in full clarity. The finish line's here. I actually thought it was actually a pretty interesting draft, and we'll talk about it today. There's a ton to talk about, but all I can think about is, man, summer's almost here. We are so close.
Summer is almost here. Charles and I are both, I think, ready to be big outside here very shortly. I'm still in LA. If you're watching the YouTube, the YouTube video, you can tell. So my adventure with the draft is not quite over yet, but we do see the finish line here. So let's jump right into it today, Charles. If you're just tuning into this show, you can get our full round 1 recap in the feed on YouTube, etc. But today we have to cover what went down on day 2 and day 3. The way we're going to do this is we've got 3 buckets here. Basically, it's fits we love, fits we're questioning, and then real quick at the end, we'll talk about some players or some picks that were good for real football, but meh for fantasy. But let's start off positive here, Charles. Let's talk about fits we love. And for this one, I think we got to start off with Ladd McConkey to the Los Angeles Chargers. It's been funny this whole draft cycle, right, Charles, where talk about coping. I feel like Chargers fans have been just trying to cope with themselves about the 5th overall pick, and we're going to get Malik Nabers, we're going to get Marvin Harrison Jr., et cetera, et cetera. Well, you didn't. Jim Harbaugh's been screaming at you that he's going to take a tackle. They took a tackle, a 5th overall. But this was, I think, why it was a good pick at 5 is because you come back in the second round, you trade up a few spots, you grab Ladd McConkey, who I think just fits so seamlessly in this offense. He's easily their best separator on day 1. I love the pick here, Charles. Ladd McConkey to the Chargers.
Yeah, I like the pick. And we talked about this, the episode where we end up doing a deep dive on like the 2012 49ers wide receiver room as to why you might not want to be surprised when they take a tackle at 5. But I also think that, when you have a quarterback who is as good as Justin Herbert, and me personally, like I put him in that elite tier. I really do think he's that good. When you have a quarterback like that, it's easy to convince yourself that, dude, if we just get a receiver, we're back in this thing, But, this is a team that gave up 63 points to the Raiders last season. All right. We should probably cool it as far as, them potentially being one piece away. This is really most likely a multi-year rebuild for them, or at least a couple years. So, Alt was a good pick. And then to come back and get McConkey, I think this is a pretty good fit with Herbert. I am interested to see how this fits with like Harbaugh's demands in the run game. Because I think in the past he's had, not necessarily in college, but in the NFL, like he had some denser, bigger receivers like Michael Crabtree and Anquan Bolden and some of those guys who were out there. So I do think that that's kind of interesting. But just from a pass game perspective, Herbert's one of those guys like where I describe his throws like they're like long range handoffs with how fast he can get the ball out there and down the field.
Yeah.
So, if you have someone like McConkey who can get open and create separation, and if he can stay healthy, and if Herbert can stay healthy, and Joe Alt will play a big role in Justin Herbert staying healthy,
right?
Which is ultimately good for Ladd McConkey and the entire Chargers offense. So if all those guys can stay healthy and stay in the field, I think this could be a pretty dynamic rookie year one for Ladd McConkey. And also, let's be real, is he the best receiver on this roster? Like already?
Dude,
yes.
I know that sounds, I know that sounds crazy to say because he's a rookie, but he's definitely the best receiver on the roster. There's no question that even if all of these, like, let's say Quentin Johnston, we live in a magic world where he takes a year two step after really a true nightmare rookie season.
It can't be that much worse.
Right. It can't be much worse. Like a Jalen Reagor-esque rookie season is what we got out of Quentin Johnston. Josh Palmer, I think, is a solid NFL receiver. He's probably best as your 3, but he's a solid NFL receiver. Even if those guys, like Josh Palmer has a good season and Quentin Johnston suddenly like takes a step forward, even if those players hit their peak, Ladd McConkey's no question still the best separator on this roster. Like he's the guy that's going to give you the most open windows. And I mean, their tight end room is interesting, right? It's like Will Dissly, it's Hayden Hurst. They have some holdovers like Parham and Stone Smart are still on the roster. Shout out Stone Smart, ODU's finest. But there's just those guys are, I don't know how much like 12 personnel you're really going to be in and you're going to take Ladd McConkey off the field, right? Because I would guess that he projects best to be the slot receiver here. But Josh Palmer's played some big slot before. I think he could probably slide inside on some looks and have Ladd McConkey be your off-ball flanker. I think Greg Roman, like, I'm not going to come out with a full-throated defense of Greg Roman here, but I do think some of the creativity that he displays as a run game designer does get overlooked, and I think Ladd could be, as we all try to defend and make excuses sometimes for Lamar Jackson. I think we went a little hard on the Greg Roman criticism, even if a lot of it was deserved. I mean, but like some of that pre-snap motions.
No, I was about to say. No. I'm about to say in defense of Greg, he's probably one of the best offensive coordinators in like the past 10 years of NFL football, or maybe even longer than that. Because you go back to Colin Kaepernick, then he did this, he had a lot of success, or, within as much success that Tyrod Taylor and the Buffalo Bills can afford you. And then to help Lamar Jackson get his career off the ground. I don't think that Greg Roman is like the best offensive coordinator for Lamar right now, but he was great for it when they first started. He's like a good, he's a good starter kit offensive coordinator to get things moving.
Great way of saying it. Greg Roman is the best starter kit you can find at offensive coordinator. He's a floor raiser.
Yes.
Now, I think you get to a point where you start bumping into the ceiling, and we will have that conversation probably like 4 years from now if this program works and those guys are still around. Like, have we hit a ceiling with where this offense can go with Justin Herbert? But I think for year one of the experiment, I like the way Ladd McConkey fits into this passing game on like play action shots, on pre-snap motion looks. I think it's a very interesting fit. I think it's a good fit. And overall, like after we look past the big 3, at the top, I think there's a pretty decent chance that Ladd McConkey could end up leading the next group of receivers in receiving yards. And hey, even like Malik Nabers in New York, Rome Odunze as the third option in Chicago. I even think there's a chance that he could outproduce one of those guys in year one, even if I think those guys are much better players. I just think there's a chance because of his skill set and how he, projects to play with Justin Herbert here. I think there's a chance he could end up being the most productive rookie this year.
Yeah, and also, I understand the concern, especially with Jim Harbaugh's track record in the past, as far as like just running the ball and kind of that being his thing. But I kind of don't feel the same concern level with this new venture with Justin Herbert as his quarterback. Like this is easily, since Andrew Luck at Stanford, this is the best thrower of the football that he's had.
Yeah.
There aren't too many guys who were like top end running skills as well as Colin Kaepernick. But I think that, Herbert's a pretty good athlete in his own right. And I think when you just have someone that good, I just don't really think Harbaugh's so dumb that he would just, we're going to run the ball 40 times a game with Justin Herbert as a quarterback. I even think it's I even think it's silly when people bring up like how Michigan played last year. Like, dude, college football is a totally
Oh,
different sport than the NFL.
yeah.
And if you're in college and the easiest way to win theoretically in football is to never have to put the ball in the air. If you can get 5-6 yards of carry every single play, you should do that. And that's what Michigan did all the way to a 15-0 record, but it's just not the same sport. I think Jim knows that. So I really don't have the same concerns that this is going to be like an out of control situation where they're running the ball way too much. I think Ladd's going to get his opportunities to eat. And, he is walking into a target vacuum of the ages, man. Like,
Yes.
they lost a ton of targets. And Mike Williams was hurt, but like theoretical targets too that are now just available. So Quentin Johnson, you're going to get every opportunity to make the most out of year 2. Ladd McConkey, you're going to get all the opportunities to make the most of your rookie year. And hopefully Joe Alt can keep Herbert upright so they can actually do that. Because I think Herbert is one of those quarterbacks that is good enough to have success with, some rookie wide receiver and someone who struggled as a rookie last year.
Yeah, elsewhere in the 7th round, they added Cornelius Johnson, shock from Michigan, and Brendan Rice of USC. Those guys, one of them, maybe both, has a chance to stick on the end of the roster. But yeah, that's a target vacuum for Ladd. And just last point on the Chargers in the running game, they didn't take a running back till Kamani Vidal out of Troy in the 6th round. So yeah, you're telling me that this team's going to try to lead the NFL in rush attempts despite having Justin Herbert, and their top running back is Gus Edwards. Solid player, but Gus Edwards and J.K. Dobbins coming off major injury, I don't think so. So yeah, I expect the Chargers to be a little more pass heavy than people think. Okay, next fit that I really loved, man, Bill Belichick out, and I'm liking some of these Patriots receivers that they took for Drake May, Jalen Polk in round 2, and then Javon Baker in round 4. Charles, I gave both of these guys priority round 2 grades. I really like both of these players, and they complement each other very well, right? Jalen Polk, I think, is going to play a little slot for you, but he's going to play outside too. He's going to be your flanker, right? He's actually a really natural replacement for Damian Harris and I were talking about this on the draft show. He's a really natural replacement for a guy that you let walk in Jacoby Myers, and that was a mistake. I think he actually slides really well sort of into that role where he could play outside, he could play in the slot. Great hands, gets open against zone coverage. I saw people criticizing this pick on, kind of mid round 2, whatever, I guess because they traded back. They don't know ball, okay? Like, I think Jalen Polk is a really nice, rock solid, maybe hitting a double, triple type of pick. And then to come back in round 4 and take Javon Baker, again, really nice complementary skill set where he is probably going to be your developmental outside X receiver. I don't know that he's ready to come from like a Big 12 offense where he's lining up on one side of the field and running a bunch of go routes and be an instant impact player, but I do think he can bring you verticality in year 1. So, hey, Drake May, congrats, buddy. You got a couple dudes to work with here in New England. I like both of these picks a lot.
The Patriots could have picked Drake May at 3 and then like 6 wide receivers in a row, and it would have made sense. Because they're in the spot where beggars can't be choosers, I don't think. And I don't think that that's not how I would evaluate their pick. But, you could look at walking into the draft, you could look at the Patriots wide receiver room and say, literally any type of wide receiver would make sense to add to this room because that's just where they were as far as their talent level last season. I mean, I personally think it's part of the reason why Bill Belichick doesn't have a job. I mean, he put together one of the slowest, least talented offenses in football last year, and they really had to get things moving in the skill position department. And I like the picks. Polk, Baker, you get to pair that with Drake May. If one of those guys hits and Drake May is who we think he is, then you're feeling probably pretty good about what the next couple of years can look like. I don't know. I don't really know how relevant they will be fantasy wise for redraft, just because there's a lot going on here, man. It's not just you put Drake May in, the offensive line is still a work in progress. These wide receivers are still work in progress. So I wouldn't be surprised if, as bullish as we are on what the Patriots have done this offseason and the start they've gotten off to the Jerome Mayo era, that it still kind of looks a little crappy this year, just because, they finished with, they're picking the draft for a reason. They're not a very good football team, but I think for the long term, this is pretty exciting. And man, I Boston fans don't deserve this, but this is a pretty good start for the new regime.
Yeah, no comment on the Boston sports fan stuff. That Charles, I have nothing to say. I have nothing to say that as to what Charles just alluded to there. But listen, yeah, I'm with you that there's going to be messy moments this year because these guys are kids, right? Like Drake May, super young. These two rookie receivers, again, like I don't even know that Javon Baker, like if Kendrick Bourne's healthy, he's probably your starting X receiver. And then Jalen Polk, I do think can start at flanker this year. But even Pop Douglas is he's going to be the slot guy most likely. Which, by the way, I like that 3 receiver set with Baker mixing in for some downfield looks. But Douglas is a second year player. Like you've made this point before, Charles, that I think lost in sort of the Arthur Smith and the quarterback situation of like the Falcons the last few years is that this is where a bunch of babies out there, like really young dudes having to carry a big burden on offense at premium positions. And that's really what New England will be looking at here when Drake May starts, like that's just where it is. So it's not, yeah, I'm with you. It's not gonna be like a fantasy frenzy offense, but I think it can be like an adult offense with Alex Van Pelt, who, is not the next Sean McVay or anything like that, but he's just a guy who's been around the block in the NFL before. He's a real offensive coordinator. We're quite a bit away from the Matt Patricia, Joe Judge disaster, here in New England. So I like these 2 picks. I think that both of them, especially Polk, because he seems, I was just stunned by some of the hate that pick got. I would bet that these 2 guys are pretty decent values in your in your dynasty rookie draft, just because I believe in Drake May and I actually really like both of these players. So I like what the Patriots did. Took some offensive linemen on day 2 as well.
Yeah, don't have too much else to say, but I agree with you. I don't really understand being down on this. Like, what prospect are you, excited for that's already on the Patriots roster that would get in the way of one of these guys starting? Kendrick Bourne probably entrenched as a starter. Demario Douglas had some moments, but that's not enough to make you not continue to add talent to that room. So I don't really see why these guys can't come in and fight for starting spots early on, even if that is kind of an indictment of where New England is right now in their roster path.
All right, the first running back went off the board to the Carolina Panthers, who traded up for Jonathan Brooks. I'm grouping this as a fit we love, Charles. Not a lot of great running back landing spots in this year's draft. It wasn't a big-time class, but even some of the guys, we'll talk about them later, on here in the meh for fantasy section for sure. Not a lot of these guys went to the depth charts that people were hoping for, right? Like, somebody's going to moonwalk to an RB1 role in Dallas. Somebody's going to moonwalk to an RB1 role with the Chargers. That didn't happen. Instead, Jonathan Brooks, who was the consensus top running back in the class, goes to the Carolina Panthers. And Charles, you can heat check me on this one, but I loved this fit. Say what you want about trading up for running backs and blah, 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 blah. I get that. But this is a head coach in Dave Canales who has said over and over and over again he wants to be stubborn with the run game, right? He wants to run the ball. Even at times last year, I do think the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were stubborn with the run game. They a lot on early down runs. So if that's what he wants to be, his philosophy, you want to keep Bryce Young on schedule, you add these big guards in free agency. I know I'm going to sound like a Chuba Hubbard hater, but like you just don't do that. Like say all that, make those investments in the offensive line, and then like, cool, we're rolling out Chuba Hubbard and Miles Sanders again. I think you need a needle moving back, and when healthy, which is not going to be early in the season, but eventually, I think Jonathan Brooks is a needle moving back.
Man, I have done like a total 180 on this pick since, and maybe this is just me working way too much and overthinking things, but I don't like it the more I think about it.
Really?
Yeah. And it's got nothing to do with trading for a running back, because I think they needed one pretty badly. And quite honestly, I think, I think a lot of this relies on Icky, the left tackle, coming back into form that he looked like as a rookie, where he was really bad last year. And if that's good, then, that offense, that run game, I should say, should run itself to a degree. But when I watched Jonathan Brooks, I rewatched him again on Friday night, and I was like, man, I feel like he's just like solid without like any one bang trait that gets you really excited. And I get a little worried, like, okay, so if he's he's not like really a burner. He's coming off of ACL. What does that look like? And you traded up. Like, I don't think trading up for a running back is necessarily bad. Trading up for this running back feels risky. And really, I feel like the whole Panthers draft felt very risky to me. Trading up for Xavier Leggett.
Fair.
You're going, trading up for Jonathan Brooks, Jatavion Sanders in the 4th round. I don't know. It just felt like a lot of guys where we're getting one big end of the pendulum or the other. I do think Jonathan Brooks will probably be a pretty solid back. I just don't know if he's got like the game-breaking ability where you feel like you need to trade up for him off an ACL.
Yeah, the coming off the ACL thing is tough, but I will say...
He could be fine, too.
I'll bring up the name Breece Hall, right? For both of these, both of the things you're talking about here. The Jets caught a lot of flack for trading up for Breece Hall, right? And like, look, again, have the Jets been good? No, but Breece Hall is a good pick, right? Like, they haven't been bad because Breece Hall, it didn't work out, right? He's been like the least of their problems. And, again, similar sort of draft range here. And he's a guy that has shown you, okay, if you have a pretty clean ACL tear, you get it done, you get it fixed. Like, you can be not just an effective back, but like a damn good dynamic back by the end of the first season off this injury. And look, like, the Panthers aren't going to be ready to compete.
No.
So like right now, so if Jonathan Brooks is ready to rock in 25 and 26 and beyond, I think this can end up being an okay pick. But I do hear your point that from a team building perspective, I'm kind of mixed on this draft because, yeah, like Xavier Leggett is a. By the way, it's Leggett, right? He let us know.
I missed that if he did say that.
He whatever. Anyways, Leggett's a risky pick in round 1, right? And trading up for him, like, instead of just sticking and picking at 33, I mean, it just makes him a first round pick. I think it adds that pressure to him. I do like what Dave Canales has said about how he's going to use Xavier Leggett. Like, I think that's good. He sounds like he's got the right plan, not just like, okay, we're going to throw him out at X receiver and see what happens. We're not going to Jonathan Mingo this guy, basically. But again, risky pick. Jonathan Brooks, there's some risk to it. And we debated this on the draft show, but I don't love when teams like Carolina try to balance out the strength of the roster. I know this is going to make me just sound like a fantasy dork, but like, I would have loved for them to just basically throw like every pick on offense, taking like a linebacker in round 3, taking a bunch of, defensive guys with their final 3 picks. I would rather just like throw everything at the offense and try to get Bryce Young to work, because that defense was solid last year. So I'm with you that I think Carolina had a risky draft overall, high risk, maybe high reward type, but I just think the pick of Jonathan Brooks makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, all these picks could work out, and I'm with you on the strategy, dude. Like, you're so far away. You're so far away on and just being in general, being like a playoff team. Like, if you couldn't really compete in the 2023 NFC South, I think that says a lot about where you are. It's not going to be rebuilt in one day. But, I do think Panthers fans should feel good about the strides they've made on offense. You have a credible offensive line. Your wide receiver room has gotten better. Deontay Johnson and Xavier Leggett, that's, way better than what you're doing last year. I've seen people be like, maybe this is going to sound mean, but I've seen people be like, hey, what about Jonathan Mingo? I'm like, who cares about that? Like, totally. That's not a factor anymore.
Yep. I got that same response, right, when Joe talking about the Xavier Leggett stuff, and it's kind of like,
they traded for Deontay Johnson.
We'll see.
And drafted receiver in the first round, and Adam Thielen's still there. I think that says everything, right?
Yeah, exactly. And to me, like I've said this all the time, but Jonathan Mingo projects best into Adam Thielen's role. Maybe you just spend this year trying to get him developed there, and maybe if you get some good signs and signals from him in the offseason and kind of as an end of roster receiver, maybe you think about him in that Adam Thielen role next year, or maybe even at the end of the season if Thielen starts to run out of gas. But like, that's so far down saving Jonathan Mingo is so far down the priority list for this Panthers coaching staff, which I have liked a lot of what they've said, and I'm interested to see this experiment play out. Okay, next one here that I really liked, Trey Benson to the Arizona Cardinals. Another pick that people kind of threw some shade at. I don't know, or I would say this, maybe not threw some shade at, but I think the landing spot disappointed some fantasy managers, right? Like people that wanted wanted really good landing spots for these backs, and we just didn't get the top tier ones. But man, behind James Conner, it's like Michael Carter and Amari DiMercado, like not a lot of needle movers in the backfield for Arizona. And you look at Arizona last year, they were quietly 12th in rushing success rate. They were 7th in rushing EPA. I, again, talk about another coaching staff that I like what Drew Petzing put together on offense last year. And like now you've got Marvin Harrison as a number one receiver, and you've got Trey Benson as a guy who isn't going to start the season ahead of James Conner. But it's a long NFL season, and James Conner is a guy that has shown you he can miss time, right?
Yeah.
So I would be 0% surprised. This is way too early to say a bold prediction like this, but it's April 28th, and like, who cares?
I will remember this.
Nobody's gonna remember this. I would be 0% surprised if Trey Benson ends up being like the league winner you need at the end of the season, right? Because I like this Arizona Cardinals offense overall. I like the way they were designed. I like the personnel upgrades, and I think Trey Benson's got some juice, and like he could maybe overtake this job by the end of the year or get into it by injury. A lot of more paths to success for Trey Benson in year one than people think right now, Charles McDonald.
Yeah, excuse me. I think you nailed it. To me, getting him at the top of round 3 was really strong value because, I would have been fine taking him like where the Panthers took Jonathan Brooks. I just think the breakaway speed, even if it's not, the most creative runner in the world, being big with breakaway speed is always something that's going to work to some degree in the NFL, even if he's not, the bell cow number one back for them right away. And now when you just start looking at the pieces that they have on offense, like they've kind of, especially if Kyler continues to improve the way he did from like his first start through the end of the season, getting more comfortable off the ACL, because I thought by the end of the season he was playing like legit good football. Go back and watch the Eagles game. He tore them apart. And I think the playmaking and the confidence in himself is kind of back. So now if Kyler's that, and he's going to continue to improve on that and kind of get back into like that top 10 quarterback discussion, you have Marvin Harrison Jr., Michael Wilson, that's a good Greg Dortch, like that's a good young trio to build around. Trey McBride at tight end. Kyler obviously loves throwing him the ball. And now you get to add Trey Benson to the backfield. Like they got some playmakers, man. We'll see how the offensive line holds up. It looks like they're going to be starting potentially a 3rd round rookie in Isaiah Adams. But I think that this is a really nice spot for Trey Benson. I think you have to love anytime a running back who has breakaway speed gets to play with a more mobile quarterback. We saw even Keaton Mitchell having success last year just by the respect that defenses have to pay for Lamar Jackson. I think that's probably why Gus Edwards had a lot of success at times in Baltimore. And now Trey Benson's going to get to experience the same thing in Arizona. It should be pretty fun this year.
A.D. Mitchell goes to the Indianapolis Colts. He was the 4th receiver drafted in the 2nd round. He was the 11th receiver drafted overall. A.D. Mitchell is way more talented than the 11th receiver in this draft class, right? He is a guy that, again, the ability is more there, but we've all heard the rumblings about, some of the difficulties and stuff like that. Chris Ballard came out and eviscerated. Did you see the clip of Chris Ballard? He was letting F-bombs and like the whole thing fly in defending A.D. Mitchell and the anonymous sources, anonymous stuff, kind of ripping these kids apart in the process, which I like that from Chris Ballard, right? Like, if you're A.D., I like that from Chris Ballard. And if you're A.D. Mitchell and you're coming into this team and you've fallen a little bit, like, it's really similar to me to the George Pickens fall from that year. They actually both go like the 52nd overall pick, literally the same pick. Where the ability is way higher there than that spot, but again, just some of the rumblings and stuff like that. I like Chris Ballard coming out and taking his shots there. And again, if you're A.D. Mitchell, you're coming into this team, you're coming into this culture. I think you got to like that support right away from day one. And Charles, you know what that Colts offense really needs to complete that receiver room? An A.D. Mitchell type of receiver. Yep. So I think this was a great pick.
Yeah, I kind of think they're in pretty good shape. And the Oregon State receiver they drafted, Anthony Gould, I know he has some fans as well. So I'm really interested in the Colts wide receiver room because you got Michael Pittman. He's back. What was that?
I was the next thing I was going to say to you was I'm really hoping you can talk me down from being way too high on this Colts offense. And the first thing you say is this is an interesting wide receiver room. I love this wide receiver room, man. It's good. Like I think right now might be the most underrated receiver room in the league. Because Pittman is good, and Downs. I mean, I love Josh Downs. Great slot receiver. I think had a really underrated rookie year. Like, how am I not going to draft so much Anthony Richardson? How am I not going to try to take my shots on these receivers? I was hoping you were going to help me like sober up and talk me down on this, and you're not.
Why would I? Look, and dude, Shane Steichen is he's a good coach too. They almost got to the playoffs with Gardner Minshew starting most of the season. So like all the way to the very last game, which was, a play-in game for them in Houston. I just think that, sometimes we talk about building wide receiver rooms like a basketball team. And I think that the Colts have done a really good job with that. Like I just think, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, A.D. Mitchell, that's a really strong trio. And then whatever you get from guys beyond that is gravy. So, look, obviously this all comes down to Anthony Richardson being able to stay on the field. It seems like he's going to be fine from the shoulder injury that he suffered last year. I thought he looked really good before he got hurt. Maybe it's a little inconsistent. Maybe he's going to need some time to get back moving. But like for where they are right now and what their future outlook is, this is a pretty exciting offense, I think, for the immediate now and thinking about long-term results.
Yeah, I think just the way the receiver room looks right now is really encouraging for Anthony Richardson in year 2 and kind of putting him in a position to succeed and not have to take some of the shots that he took in year 1. I think the Colts are also probably going to have more confidence in the receiver room after getting what you got from Michael Pittman last year, which is just a fantastic season as basically like the engine of the offense last year because Jonathan Taylor missed time. Getting that season from Pittman, committing to him long-term, and like now Josh Downs is in year 2 and also isn't going to be dealing with like a nagging knee injury. People forget that about Downs' rookie season, that he was playing through a knee injury consistently, especially in the back half of the year, which is kind of why the production faded off a little bit. And look, now you have a guy in A.D. Mitchell who's you just take Alec Pierce out. Thank you for your service. And you throw A.D. Mitchell in if A.D. Mitchell's good in year 1, which even if he's good in year 1, you're throwing him the ball maybe like 5 times a game. Or there are going to be matchups where you throw him the ball more than that, but he's not going to be your volume hog receiver. He doesn't need to be. That's a good thing, I think, for A.D. Mitchell to sort of grow and develop and kind of get that route running consistently up to speed, especially against zone coverage. And Anthony Richardson, like Shane Steichen's praised the processing consistently. You see that on film his rookie year. Like he's working that offense to a high level. So yeah, I don't know how I'm not going to get way too high on this Colts offense. It's probably going to happen. Probably going to age poorly, but that's where I'm at, man. I think this group is really good. I think they've set him up to succeed. Anthony Richardson, yeah, man.
Just stay on the field, buddy.
This is going to be a tough
stay
one.
on the field.
Just stay on the field. I think A.D. Mitchell will be interesting in terms of rookie drafts, like where he ends up going, but probably more of a second rounder right now. And that's fine. I'm willing to take my shots there, especially because I believe in Anthony Richardson. I don't think most of the fantasy community believes that he can be a consistent passer and like elevate receivers. I disagree with that. I think you saw enough from that brief glimpse that you can believe it. And look, like this was an area the Colts needed to address. Charles Robinson had a good way of explaining it when he was talking to sources pre-draft, and there was a lot of buzz about the Colts were in love with Xavier Worthy in round 1, like potentially thinking about him at 15 overall. The Colts had like the intermediate. You just think about buckets of the field. This is the Michael Pittman bucket, the intermediate area. This is the Josh Downs bucket, the short area. And like Pittman can kind of do a little bit of everything. Those guys can mix around. But that deep area they didn't have, that's where A.D. Mitchell's going to pop in there. Another kind of, personality faller here in this draft, character concerns, was Jermaine Burton. But
this pick was so funny. This pick was so funny. It was just classic Bengals, like the throwback to the Marvin Lewis days. Bro, we're taking character concerns because he could flat out fly.
I said the same thing live, like Bengals, man, and we haven't really gotten this stuff from the Bengals recently, but yeah, this was a throwback pick here. Jermaine Burton, 16th pick in the third round, and Charles, I was stunned actually that he went in the third round, just because he just seemed like he was a guy that was going to fall to the fourth round or something like that, like he was going to get dinged because everybody was parroting the character concern stuff. But the Bengals take a chance at a position of clear screaming need, right? For both the short term and the long term. I think Jermaine Burton's going to be one of those guys because he got that investment in the third round. And like you can listen to our wide receiver preview show, to kind of hear us break down Jermaine Burton. I think he has first round talent. So to go in the third round here, 16th pick in the third round to a team that has big need like this, he's going to be a guy that I would be targeting in every single rookie draft because he gets the investment. He's with a good quarterback that can hopefully get him invested and on track, right? Just integrated into the culture and like, hey man, like let's dial in here because if he hits, like he can be your T. Higgins replacement next season.
Yeah. I think this is a great pickup for them. I think he complements Jamar Chase pretty well, and I imagine that the Bengals will be trying to lock that up. They should be trying to lock Jamar Chase up as soon as they can because these wide receiver contracts are only stacking. The Eagles that kind of got ahead of it a little bit with the Devonta Smith and AJ Brown extensions, but like CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, you should probably get on that now, Cincinnati. You should probably get on that now before it turns to be like 30 plus, like real into the 30s, on an average per year basis. But this is a great fit. I think Burrow's going to make the most of his skill set. And also, again, like we talked about with the Chargers, going back to the first round to get Amarius Mims, that's going to help keep Joe Burrow upright, which obviously was a massive problem for them last season and has been really a problem for them since Joe Burrow has been drafted. But if Amarius Mims works out, Orlando Brown kind of improves from last year, I don't know. I think the Bengals offense should get right back to where we expect it to be and have gotten used to it being. And like you said, this is a good move for the long term and the short term. Because they might need the flexibility at receiver depending on if they mess up this T. Higgins situation or not.
Last thing here in Fitz we loved both of the day 3 picks from the Miami Dolphins.
No.
Jaylen Wright, you don't love that?
The Jaylen Wright pick I thought was terrible.
Man, okay.
Trading a 2025 third, I don't know. It just seemed a little extreme to me.
Yes, no, okay, I'm with you from like a value standpoint. I get that. It was extreme, especially at a position that you don't really, like you have Devon Achane there,
and
but
Mostert.
They probably do need to. But they probably need to. I'm saying long term, they probably need to develop like a long term Mostert replacement plan, and like I would think banking on the season you got from Raheem Mostert last year is a little risky. But I do think Jaylen Wright is a big time project, right?
Yes.
I think his rushing style is extremely. It just doesn't map to the NFL like what he did last year at Tennessee. So I agree with you. That is a risk, but I understand that like if you're going to get something out of him, it's going to be in this offense. I think this kind of like Looney Tunes offense they're building down there.
I will agree with you there.
But man, the Malik Washington pick though. I mean, my God, Malik Washington in the 6th round, number 1, incredible value. He was much better than that. I think it's crazy that Wan'Dale Robinson goes in round 2 a couple of years ago, like Rondale Moore goes in round 2, and Malik Washington falls to the 6th round. That makes no sense to me. Also, just what a perfect addition to this particular offense, again, where they need a third receiver. They probably need like a true slot presence, and they're going to do all the motion stuff and get him going after the catch. Mike McDaniel was hyped after the Malik Washington pick, and so was I, okay? I'm just as hyped as you, Mike McDaniel, so I get it. Some of the value proposition with Jaylen Wright as a developmental running back is a little risky, but I think both of these guys make sense in this offense.
Malik Washington, I think it's a good fit. He's one of those guys that's short, not small, and still runs plenty fast too. So obviously, no one's taking targets away from Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, especially not a 6th round rookie.
Right.
But he can come in and fill that spot. Jaylen Wright, I'm not really a big fan of the player, but There's so many times like when you go back and watch Mike McDaniel's offense last year with Devon Achane. I think Achane's a better player than Wright, but still, it's where it's just this is wide open, bro. If you can just run straight, you have a chance to make some big plays in this offense because he's going to pop it open for you. And they got an offensive line boost in Patrick Paul. So I was really wary about Jaylen Wright because I don't see the vision. I don't really think he runs between the tackles well, but this is the one offense in the NFL, I think, where you don't have to do that to be a very productive player.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll talk through some fits we are questioning following the second and third day of the NFL draft. All right, we're back. Let's talk through some fits that we are questioning, Charles McDonald, starting with Keon Coleman to the Bills. Maybe you can talk me down on this one, but didn't love this spot. Or should I say I'm kind of mixed on the Keon Coleman pick for the Bills because it sounds like they're going to use him as their X receiver, which I don't love. Okay. I think Keon is best deployed off the line in the slot. I've talked about that a lot this draft season, but they're kind of flush with slot options, right? They use Kincaid as a slot at the tight end position. Khalil Shakir is a slot receiver. Curtis Samuel's a guy you want to play flanker and slot. So they did need a true X. I just think Keon Coleman's kind of a low percentage X receiver. He's a guy that's going to win jump balls. He's not going to get a lot of separation. He is not Gabe Davis, right? Very different player. He's a better separator than Gabe Davis. He's a better player against zone coverage. He works the middle of the field much better, has much more consistent hands than Gabe Davis. But from a vertical presence standpoint, that's a sort of like I see some low percentage overlap there, but I guess that just means that they have a lot more confidence this year in Samuel and Khalil Shakir being your separators and your layup targets. So I think there's going to be a tendency, and look, like for a low separation jump ball receiver, Josh Allen's probably the perfect quarterback for you to go to. Like he's going to take those shots, but at the same time, I think from just an overall volume standpoint, you can only throw the ball to this player in this role so much when you have these other options. I think there's going to be a tendency for maybe fantasy folks to get overexcited about what Keon can do in year one, and maybe he's more of like a long-term bet. I don't know. So again, it's one I'm questioning and I'm going back and forth on. How do you feel?
Well, I've been back and forth on Keon the whole time because, man, like I know we've talked before. Like I watched a lot of college football during the season, and the way that I think I wrote it this weekend during the live draft ticker that I was working on for the app, where, if you told me after I watched like Florida State versus Clemson in September, October, that Keon Coleman would be a second round pick, I'd probably say you're smoking dust, bro. Like that makes absolutely no sense. But then he didn't have the great, he wasn't as hot in the second half of the season. And then he ran the 4.640, which I do think is kind of backed up on tape, where you look back and you're like, man, I still think he's got some really big time playmaking ability, but it's just it's difficult plays at times that he's making, and I think the margin for error is just going to be obviously smaller in the NFL. So like I've gone back and forth with it. This is kind of an interesting class where it's like, you look at Ladd McConkey, Keon Coleman, Roman Wilson with the Steelers. All these guys are walking into humongous target vacuums that will only be filled by them for the most part. So, I think it'll be a good opportunity for Keon. We're going to learn a lot about him this year because he's going to be a starter. Yeah. And he's going to be, I would imagine, getting around 100 targets this year, just because who the hell else are you going to throw to besides your tight ends? And Josh Allen might be talented enough to make it work. That's why I just keep going back and forth on it. I do think this is the type of receiver that they needed to add to their offense. And I like the process of trading down a couple times and getting more picks because Buffalo, like they're in a bit of a transition period as far as their roster turnover is going. So, to end up making like 10 picks like they did this weekend was probably pretty smart. I'm just with you. I can't decide how I feel about Keon Coleman, but there's still part of me that holds out hope that like he's the guy I thought he was back in, September.
Yeah, I don't think Keon Coleman like stinks or anything.
Yeah.
Like I don't think he was I thought he was a day 2 draft pick. Like he went where he should have gone. I didn't think he was a round 1 guy. He went, at the top of the second round, so that was aggressive. But overall, gave him like a good day 2 ranking. So fine, this is okay. I just think we'll get to a point where we're saying like like if Samuel doesn't hit and Khalil Shakir doesn't take a step from like a solid, reliable slot receiver to maybe somebody you want to push the ball to more often, I think we'll be coming out of this year saying like, okay, Josh Allen needs another receiver. He needs another separator. But I think the target distribution there is going to be pretty tight. Like, I think that all of these guys can finish. Samuel, Coleman, Shakir can finish somewhere between like 80 to 100 targets, but nobody's going to be like a 130 target player in this offense right now. I think Keon Coleman, like if he ever gets there, it's just going to take a lot of development. But overall, I do really like his feel for zone coverage, and that's something that this Bills offense needs.
The last Keon Coleman thing that I have, the cope here, if you're looking for cope, is the miles per hour numbers way better than the 40 time. I don't know, just saying.
Yes, and I think, by the way, I think that we talked about this with Daniel Jeremiah on the lead up to the draft and on his Mock Draft Monday episode, that like confidence through the catch, like being grounded through the catch. That's what like you watch Keon Coleman in the gauntlet and on film, by the way, and then you watch like Troy Franklin, who we'll talk about later, doing the same thing. One guy has confidence in his hands, the other guy does not. Okay, and like Keon Coleman is a confident catcher and a reliable target. He's not a reliable separator, but he's a reliable target. So again, I am definitely with you where I'm going back and forth on the Keon Coleman thing, especially because look, other than the reality of the situation is other than other than AD Mitchell, there was nobody else that like went in round 2 that I was like, you got to take this guy instead. And like AD Mitchell's maybe they don't want to do the AD Mitchell thing after the Stephon Diggs thing. Like, I think that's totally understandable if they have some of those some of those interview concerns that Chris Ballard, is ripping on. So I can understand that one. Okay, Malachi Corley to the Jets. Round 3 was aggressive. Top of round 3 was aggressive to me on Malachi Corley. Good football player, I think. But is like, where is he on the gadget receiver spectrum? Charles McDonald, because I think based on the like text messages that the Jets social media put out, like where Malachi Corley, no matter what, the Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas were texting each other, I bet they think he's more along the Debo archetype. Yeah. I kind of tend to think he's not all the way down there with like Wan'Dale Robinson and Rondale Moore. Sorry to keep ripping on these guys, but he's somewhere in the middle. Where in the middle is
he ain't Debo, because I feel like I could put Debo in a one-on-one against some offensive lineman and he might win. It's just a totally different. I mean, dude, Debo's out here running over linebackers. I wouldn't expect that.
Yeah.
For any receiver, I don't think is reasonable. Corley is just, it's just interesting because I just wonder, is this like really what the Jets feel like they need to round out their offense? Same. I do like Corley as a player. I think the yards after catch stuff is real. I think that's going to be a piece of his game. I think he's good with the ball in his hand. He's not Deebo Samuel, but there's a tiers where you can still be a quality player in between. Falling far from where Deebo Samuel is. But also like he's the third option. Maybe even the fourth option with Breece Hall there.
Yeah.
Maybe round 3 is a little bit rich. Even I don't know. I don't really feel that strongly about this pick.
Yeah, I just think that he's the fourth option. But what if not even what if, like what happens when Mike Williams is not 100%? What happens when he's hurt? Right? Like that's my thing here. That I think the Jets needed another real receiver,
Burton,
right?
And
I think. Yeah, Burton would have been nice here. There's just a lot of guys that I would have personally rather see them come away with. I would have rather see them come away with a Jermaine Burton. Even we'll talk about Roman Wilson. I wasn't super, super high on Roman Wilson, but I think that would have kind of Javon Baker, I think would have made more sense. Troy Franklin, I think would have made more sense if just, some of the off-field stuff there that I've heard whispers about. Again, we'll talk about him but yeah, I think they needed another outside option, and Malachi Corley's not that. He's like a creative touches slot type of option. So I still feel like the Jets are missing a presence there, but good football player, should be a nice addition to the offense. I also just don't love any sort of okay, how do we get this guy the ball? Like that's a problem to solve. And now you're asking Nate Hackett to solve that problem. I get it. It's really Aaron Rodgers' offense, but I'm going to continue to make that point with the New York Jets. Two like round 3 receiver picks that I kind of raise my eyebrows at from a value perspective and a fit perspective. Jalen McMillan, 29th pick in the 3rd round to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And then Luke McCaffrey, 37th pick, round 3 to the Washington Commanders. McMillan's fine. I don't really have a strong feeling on this. I just think he's a slot only player where they've talked about getting Chris Scott, this new coaching staff on the offense. Liam Cohen's talked about getting Chris Godwin back into the into the slot and that power slot role, which is I think where he's at his best, most effective. And McMillan's a slot only player, so is he a long-term replacement for Chris Godwin? I don't know. He's probably not taking snaps away from Trey Palmer on the outside. So that one I kind of raised my eyebrows at. But the Luke McCaffrey one, look, I think Luke McCaffrey's a nice potential slot receiver, Charles. But neither of these guys scream like high upside, big time target earners. And to take them over, again, the guys like Troy Franklin and Javon Baker, who went early round 4, the Malik Washingtons of the world. I don't know that one. Just these 2 picks, I was kind of raising my eyebrows.
Oh yeah, I gotta say the Luke McCaffrey pick made no sense to me whatsoever. Like I was not surprised. I wasn't really surprised to see Jalen McMillan picked where he was. I don't think it's a clean fit right now, but maybe Chris Godwin isn't going to be there forever. I did not understand Luke McCaffrey going, pick 100. Maybe this is just one of those weird picks that ends up working out well. Maybe they're just taking a bet on the McCaffrey bloodline. I don't know. Thought it was a little weird. But overall, I mean, the further you get down the draft, like once we're in the triple digits on the picks, I'm not gonna kill you. It did feel a little bizarre though to take him to close out round 3. Congrats to Luke though. Yeah, congrats.
Yeah, shout out to Luke. Hey, man, if you're cashing in on bloodlines, cash in, baby. Okay, I mean, that blood runs forever, right?
It does.
Why not?
Run CMC.
Okay, so Luke McCaffrey, a little bit of a weird pick. But I guess this means they think Jahan Dotson can play outside, which, I would like to see him do some more slot stuff because I think McCaffrey is a slot only player. Let's talk through 4 players here to close it out that were good for real football, a little meh for fantasy here, Charles. Starting with Blake Corum in round 3 to the Los Angeles Rams. Again, I'll mention a conversation I had with Damian Harris, back and forth, posted on social media too from the draft show, which, by the way, just got to give a shout out to Damian Harris.
He was good.
What a stud. He was so good on the draft show, and he's never done any broadcast work. Like, that was legitimately the first thing he's ever done. And like, I told Damian afterwards, I'm like, hey, buddy, I've worked with a lot of players over the years, guys that have been doing this for a long time. And like in terms of interviews and stuff like that, super polished, incredible stuff, total natural. I hope we continue. Here's my message to the bosses on the pod publicly. Let's do more stuff with Damian Harris. I hope we do. He was fantastic. But anyways, conversation I had with him when the Blake Corum pick happened, and everybody's loving it. Everybody's loving the Blake Corum to the Rams. I'm like, yo, this is true, but it sucks for fantasy. And Damian says, okay, so it's good for Blake Corum, it's good for the Rams, it's good for Sean McVay. Yeah. It's probably good for Kyren Williams too, because he's a guy that like can get a little spell, right? Like he doesn't need to take all that workload, but it's bad for fantasy. Yes, 100%. It just makes this situation a mess to project, Charles. How do we split this backfield up now? I have no idea. It probably takes, I mean, it's a good fit for Blake Corum, right? Like I said, man gap, power run scheme that they had last year. Great fit for Blake Corum. But for the selfish fantasy folks, Charles, it stinks.
Yeah, I mean, the question, how do you split up this backfield? The answer is probably you don't, unless something happens to Kyren Williams or Blake Corum just turns out to be like truly exceptional. Because Kyren Williams, the way he ended the season, he should be your RB1 if you're the Rams. I think Corum is a good player. I think Corum will definitely eat into some of the reps. I think landing spot wise, this is perfect for Blake Corum because the Rams, they went out. They beefed up their interior offensive line. They went outside Dylan Jackson. They're moving Steve Avila to the center. They are going to absolutely maul people on the interior if those guys stay healthy. But I just am a little surprised that they spent the third round pick on an RB2. I know it seems like the Rams over the past couple of years, it's clear they really, really value college production. You look at like Kobe Turner, Puka Nacua, Steve Avila, some of these guys that played a ton of football in college. Then even back to this year, Jared Verse, Brandon Fisk, both guys who played a ton of football. So I don't think they're even turned off by like the age or anything like that. They're just trying to get ready now football players, which is fine when you have a quarterback. I just don't really see the opportunity for it this year as far as fantasy goes. But I think Corum's going to be really useful for the Rams offense in a much smaller role than he had last year.
Yeah, I don't know, man. My instincts with this situation tell me to be ready to believe anything in terms of how the work gets split up here, just because like that's how the running back position goes, right? Like you can have a great year and then maybe just Blake Corum's just flat out better. I mean, the way they talked about Blake Corum was they just kept talking about Kyren Williams. So clearly they love Kyren Williams. They love him so much they wanted to get him a clone. They wanted to clone Kyren Williams, and they thought that was what Blake Corum was going to give them here. So the drop-off from Kyren Williams to everybody else in that backfield was severe.
Yeah.
And I think that's why they spent a third-round pick on basically like maybe a backup or just like a Kyren Williams clone here for when he gets injured. Okay, Marshawn Lloyd, also in round 3 to the Packers. Interesting because they just paid Josh Jacobs all that money. Sort of paid Josh Jacobs all that money. That's a bit of a funny money deal where the agent gets to parody around like, 4 years, look at all that money. Josh Jacobs, they could cut him after this year.
For sure.
I think Josh Jacobs could have a nice year and they don't want to cut him, but the fact that they spend a third round pick on Marshawn Lloyd, even though you sign Josh Jacobs and you bring back AJ Dillon, although
the AJ Dillon contract might be even faker than the Josh Jacobs one.
Totally. I'm totally with you. So the Marshawn Lloyd pick is interesting. This is another one where, again, it's not great for immediate opportunity. But Marshawn Lloyd's a guy that, again, Damian Harris on the draft show, I was like, look, I know he's got fumbling problems and classic former Patriots running back. Damian's like, nope. Don't even say anything after that. If he's got fumbling problems, don't even tell me what else. Like, again, classic Patriots running back.
Got a point, though.
Got to get that corrected. Yeah, got a point. So I don't know, man. I just like the Marshawn Lloyd pick. It was like, considering what the Josh Jacobs contract is.
Yeah, I think this is just like we need. Yeah, sometimes like I think you need to just look at the draft as in we need to stack some assets at certain positions, and for the Packers, like getting a cost-controlled 4-year contract at running back was a smart move for them. And I think Marshawn Lloyd's a good player. The fumbling is definitely concerning. And I tend to agree with Damian, bro. If you're not going to hold on to that rock, you cannot play. Like, that's why I am still a proponent of the fumble touchback rule, because there should be punishments for not holding on to the football. It's like the ethos of the sport. Okay. You have to hold on to the ball.
Protect the ball.
Like, you've learned that from it's the first thing you learn when you start playing football. This thing is sacred. So, I think that might be a bit of a challenge for him to get on the field. But, I think that this is still a smart play, because if you look at Josh Jacobs over the past 2 years, he's had like one stretch 2 years ago that was nice. But like, if you're going to cut these seasons into halves, like, so you have 4 halves of seasons over the past 2 years for Josh Jacobs, he's been pretty bad in 3 of them. So I think that, it's just going to be, it's kind of a stretch for me to think that Josh Jacobs will just be back to, the guy that was trying to get like a real full-time running back contract a couple of years ago. It feels so, but you know what I mean? Like, he's on part-time pay. There's no guaranteed money on his deal after this year. So if it doesn't go well for him, it's Marshawn Lloyd time. But for this year, it's a bit of a logjam at running back, although I don't really think AJ Dillon's a factor here.
No, neither do I. Okay, Roman Wilson to the Steelers. I'm lower than consensus on Roman Wilson. But late round 3, mid round 3 was okay. Fine for me. It makes a lot of sense for what the Steelers want in a receiver. One, no drama, like team first guy, check, number one. a guy who's willing to like mix it up as a blocker, even if he doesn't have the size, right? Check. I don't think he's ever going to be Roman Wilson, like a high target player, but he's a guy that's going to rip the top off. He's going to rip you over the middle on like deep overs, play action routes. Sounds like an Arthur Smith offense, man. So I like this fit from a real life perspective, but listen, George Pickens is still going to need to handle like a boatload of targets this year because I don't think Roman Wilson's a guy that's going to get a ton of volume. This team's still clearly going to just try to run the piss out of the ball, which I think they can do based on everything they've done this offseason. So, I don't know. The Roman Wilson one, again, I can see the vision in terms of him as a receiver in the Steelers offense, but from a fantasy perspective, like if they have taken he didn't go near where they went, but like if they took like a Ricky Pearsall type, I'd have been like, okay, maybe this is we can expand the passing offense a little bit. I don't feel that way after
you and this Ricky Pearsall guy, man. Jesus Christ.
Brother, wait, just talk to me when Ricky Pearsall is balling out, okay?
All right, I'll eat my crow. I'll eat my crow. The only thing with
and if he's not, then we'll never address this again. We'll never have Charles back.
That's fine. I don't like working right now. I'm a little tired. But with Roman Wilson, I do think I know. Look, I just experienced this as a Falcons fan with Arthur Smith for the past 3 years. It's a weird offense, man. Where I think their biggest problem is like a lot of games they just didn't run a whole lot of plays for whatever reason. Quarterback based, scheme based. It just didn't. They never really got opportunity to get going, and a lot of it was their own doing. So if they can just run more plays, like who's the competition for targets outside of Pickens for the Steelers? Like Van Jefferson,
Calvin Austin?
I don't know. So I don't think that this is like a great play for year one, and I think that this is mostly born due to necessity after the Deontay Johnson trade. But Roman Wilson. I don't know. I don't see. I don't know like how him getting like 80 targets is going to go. If he can pull together that many in this offense, it just seemed like a bit of a rich pick for a team that like needed a starter, and I think he's more like a wide receiver 3.
Yeah,
but
that's where I come down. Correct. That is where I come down overall with the Roman Wilson pick. Last guy we'll talk about here, Troy Franklin to the Broncos. Troy Franklin fell to the 4th round. I think that stunned a lot of people. We talked about Troy Franklin on the show, Charles, and number one, did hear a lot of like their not great interviews, character stuff like that. Maybe pushed him down. Did hear about that prior to the draft, but and that probably would be the biggest explanation for why a guy like this falls to the 4th round. Because I had questions about the film, right? I had questions about his ability to play through press and like, does he trust his hands? The answer is no, he does not. And like, you can't tell me otherwise. So, but that still is a big fall down to the 4th round. I'm kind of mixed on the Broncos landing spot too. I mean, after Bo Nix, like now you reunite Troy Franklin with Bo Nix. Maybe that's the great shower narrative, as Adam Levitan likes to call it. Maybe you can convince yourself on that, but it's just a weird depth chart in Denver, weird offense in Denver. So if you had your rookie draft before the NFL draft, which I don't do it, never advise doing it. And people were taking Troy Franklin in the 1st round of rookie drafts.
Ooh.
Buddy, you caught a fallen knife here on this one. Okay. And I don't feel great about where he landed now that this might work out. But I do like the value for Troy Franklin in the 4th round. It's just kind of questionable.
Yeah, I mean, I as much flack as the Falcons, I think, deservedly caught for the Penix pick, I think you can say the Bo Nix pick was just as bad or maybe even worse.
Yeah, potentially worse.
I don't know, because at least with Penix, like, you can kind of squint and see some playmaking ability. With Nix, I feel like it's just a very classic backup quarterback profile. But Sean Payton seems to see like some shades of Drew Brees, which, man, I think that's really doing a disservice to how dynamic Drew Brees was as a player coming out of Purdue. Like, dude, he could run. He had a rifle. He was just shorter. And then, as you age, he kind of became more a statue in the pocket. But, with Knicks, I don't get it. I've seen people talk about like his touchdown to interception ratio in college, 45-3. Come on, that's not real. Like obviously it was real for college. It happened.
Fake.
But for evaluation purposes, how often do we see guys with monster numbers in college never do anything at quarterback in the NFL? Happens all the time. I think it's more about traits. I just struggle to see where they end up as far as viewing him as a starter. And for Troy Franklin, I just don't really know where you get off the ground here. Unless Bo Nix is just a lot better and he's a perfect fit for what Sean Payton wants to do and they can kind of run the ball, it just doesn't seem like they have the quarterback talent to make the most out of this. Now, you're looking at a quarterback room with Bo Nix, Zach Wilson, and Jarrett Stidham. What? Unless I'm just way off from Bo Nix, I don't really see why you would be excited about where Troy Franklin is right now, even though I do think he's a good player with a whole lot of room to grow into something that's, startable.
Yeah, he could be better than Marvin Mims.
Yeah.
Not hard to do.
Yeah.
Based on rookie season. But yeah, and I like Troy Franklin a little bit better as a prospect than Marvin Mims, despite, again, the 4th round draft capital here. So it's a depth chart that Troy Franklin can climb. But like, if he's also struggling with his hands and struggling to beat press, like he could be a guy that doesn't even see the field on game day because like you're not starting him outside over Cortland Sutton or Josh Reynolds even, who's just like a rock solid guy. So yeah, I could be talked into either direction with Troy Franklin. I think this draft capital really kind of cements that as a take there. All right, Charles, we did it, buddy. Appreciate you for another fantastic draft season with us, previewing prospects, being here for the post-draft reaction, especially in the wake of your Falcons. I mean, just basically throwing you the bird on Thursday night. So it's all I listen. I respect the hell out of your work. I respect the hell out of your takes, and I appreciate you being here for the ride, man. It was another fun draft, and it was a good one. So thanks for doing it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's a lot of work, but I do look forward to these podcasts, and now we just get to rest and be human again. So
yeah, see, you say that. I got a lot of charting to do on the second year guys now. So
I'm about to go.
I'll be right back in the lab as soon as I get the hell out of LA here. But yeah, Charles, appreciate you, buddy. This was awesome. Everybody make sure to check out Charles' full draft grades on Yahoo for all the things you didn't get in this show, even though we gave you a hell of a lot. On Tuesday, we're going to be back with Andy Behrens. Yes, that's right. Andy Behrens, currently drunk off the glory of his Chicago Bears taking his Iowa Hawkeyes punter in the NFL draft. That's what he's most excited about. Caleb Williams? No.
I'm so jealous.
Rome Odunze? No. It's the punter that Andy Behrens is excited about. He's going to join me for Draft Fantasy Winners and Losers on Tuesday. Until then, we're out.